In Nelson Mandela Bay, the newly elected mayor, Gary van Niekerk from the Northern Alliance, has failed to appoint a new mayoral committee, despite saying this morning he will be making the appointments at noon today. Van Niekerk was elected mayor with help from the ANC and the EFF. His own party has, we understand, only 3 seats in the council. Dr. Sebake is a political analyst at Nelson Mandela University. Dr. Sebake, good afternoon to you. Van Niekerk claimed he was ready to appoint a new mayoral committee. Now we have this delay. We don't yet know. What does this suggest about what's happening? Is this about the EFF and the ANC all over again?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to the viewers. Stephen, I think it is not as easy as we may think in terms of really formulating government. It actually indicates that the closed behind doors discussions have not been concluded. Therefore, it is difficult for mayor to appoint his own, a mayoral committee, given the non-conclusion of those discussions behind the closed doors.
We saw in Ekurhuleni, for example, that ANC councillors refused to be sworn in to their positions on the mayoral committee for about 3 weeks. And there's nothing that the new mayor, in that case from the African Transformation, could do about it. How much power then does Van Niekerk have in this? Is he actually in quite a difficult position?
Well, Stephen, I think he can't be able to appoint them on his own without really taking into confidence the coalition partners. Because he knows that once he does that, he operates outside the collective agreement of the coalition partner, and that he may not see the light as a mayor for a longer period, and that particular coalition would then collapse.
The last coalition, I'm talking about the one that lost power on Friday, they were in office for about 10 months. It was a 10-member coalition, so a very big coalition. Is it possible to make predictions about how long this coalition will last now in Nelson Mandela Bay?
It is very difficult to tell. I'll tell you why, Stephen, because coalitions, by very nature of existence in South Africa as they unfold, they are a product of a national project. Any political party may pull the strings from the national office, and we see a coalition starting to really fall apart. One may predict that a period equal to that 10 months may tell us that we have to come back to deal with the question of fallout in this coalition, because it is, by very nature of its own existence, a very fragile commodity.
How important is the ANC to all of this? In some places we've seen, for example, that the ANC and the EFF really do need to work together. In Nelson Mandela Bay, in this coalition, it's really the ANC that's in the driving seat, isn't it? It has the highest number of seats. Does that give them a lot of power in this case now?
It does not give them any power, to be quite honest, because I think the reality is that the major role that the EFF as a partner in this coalition, as it has been seen in Tshwane, in Ekurhuleni, in Johannesburg, is actually very influential towards forging cohesion and stability in any coalition, a partner. And as a result, what may be interesting at this point is whether the EFF might not be embraced in the mayoral committee, as they have not been appointed from the position of the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the speaker. Therefore, one is watching on how they are going to be embraced this time.
One of the key positions in any position like a mayoral committee or a cabinet is always finance. And yet I can imagine that quite a few of the parties might want the position of finance member of the mayoral committee. I mean, that's probably going to be quite difficult for Van Niekerk, isn't it? Lots of people are going to want that particular post.
It is possible, but also another position which is actually likely to also be a contested terrain is a position of infrastructure, because that is where the vast, a chunk of budget that is tailor-made for service delivery lies.
Nelson Mandela Bay has seen all of this before. You're a bit ahead of the rest of us, because for a long period after 2016, you had changes. Mongameli Bobani was the mayor for a time. He came from a smaller party, the UDM. Of course, he's passed on now. What was that like for Nelson Mandela Bay? Power was changing hands. There was a sort of minority administration, also propped up to an extent by the ANC. It seemed that governance was very, very difficult during that time.
It's a fragile commodity, Stephen. If you'd remember, Nelson Mandela Bay Metro started with this coalition way back. In this period of 7 years that this coalition have been experienced in South Africa, they have now elected the 7th mayor, which pose an unrosy picture. Where the coalition, it's really something that is understood by our politicians. And it is also quite really, if you may put in aggregate, does it really mean that every mayor spent approximately 12 months in office? This is a very worrisome factor in terms of political stability of any municipality in a developmental local government.
During that time, when Bobani was mayor, the Patriotic Alliance really played a key role. It held the balance of power. It was prepared to swap sides. It was very open about doing that. Is it still important now? The maths has sort of turned against it in Nelson Mandela Bay. It doesn't seem to be playing the same role.
Look, I think the mayor's role in Nelson Mandela Bay, like any government that is in coalition, is actually tends to become very ceremonial on the basis that every call the mayor has to play, every guitar in a music that he has to ensure that he dance, must have been okayed by a collective. That's the fragility and the nature of what coalition politics bring in South Africa at the current point of an interesting time.
In a way, a large part of why this is happening is because the ANC and the EFF cannot actually sort out their relationship between them. They both say they won't vote for someone from the other party for mayor, which, considering that they're asking other parties and they're voting for other parties' positions as mayor, is quite a strange thing. How do you think voters see all of this? Are voters getting more and more cynical, more and more frustrated as we see this kind of merry-go-round of smaller party mayors?
You are quite correct, because what has been observed in our local government since 2016, they are both politics of ideology, also personal politics, that really engulf our municipalities. And the fundamental aspect of those challenges is that this is an arrangement that political parties have without considering the vast majority of those who voted in their support. And as a result, it has actually made local government to be a very vulnerable and unstable and, trading on a shaky political environment. And as a result, we are still going to see more if really there could not be change in attitude and appetite to foreground government that is responsive.
In other words, could voters turn against some of these parties for doing this?
I beg your pardon?
Could voters turn against some of these parties for doing this? They could, in fact, say to political parties, well, you created this mess in Nelson Mandela Bay, or you created this situation in Joburg, and vote against them.
There are two choices voters may do. Voters may realize that I think what they have done over the past 7 years is regrettable and is regressing in terms of their own livelihoods to develop. As a result, then, foreground one party that may be able to actually come to the picture in terms of promoting their well-being. Or ultimately, there are those who might reject voting completely as a way of creating a feeling of disarray out of the political system that has been created by these 7 years in local government.
Dr. Sebake, thank you from Nelson Mandela University. Really do appreciate the time.